How's everybody doing today? Okay, good. I'm Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network, host of the African History Network show. I'm a talk show host, researcher, lecturer, and writer. Can somebody pass these around? Just take one and pass them around. All right, so what are we celebrating this month?
Black History Month.
Okay, Black History Month, or African American History Month, which is what it's called now. How many people are familiar with the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History? Created by Dr. Carter G. Woodson. Who knows who Dr. Carter G. Woodson is? Okay, who's Dr. Carter G. Woodson? Who can tell me? Yes.
Okay, actually, he's the historian that started Black History.
Started out as a week in 1926. Right. So Dr. Carter G. Woodson was an educator. He was born in 1875 in Virginia. Okay, in Nuance, Virginia. He was born 10 years after slavery ended, and he was he's going to go on to go to Berea College in Kentucky. He goes to University of Chicago. He gets a bachelor's and a master's from the University of Chicago. He goes on to Harvard University. He graduates from Harvard in 1912 and gets a PhD in American history. But because he was an educator, he understood that our people, the adults and the children did not understand their history. Okay? So the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, which used to be the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History, that started September 9th, 1915. And what happens is, 1915, how many people are familiar with the Great Migration? Great Migration? From the south to the north? That's how a lot of us got up here. The Great Migration, right? Okay, starts about 1915 to 1970. 6 million African Americans migrate from the south up north and out west. Okay, and this is during World War I. World War I, 1914 to 1918. 5 million men go fight in World War I. 370,000 of them are African American men. And what happens is when these white men go and fight in World War I, when they leave, they have jobs. When they come back, it's African Americans and immigrants who came to this country doing those jobs. So the year after 1918, what is that called? What is that called? That's called the Red Summer. Anybody know why it's called the Red Summer? Because there were over 25 major race riots in this country. Because when these men come back, right, they don't have jobs anymore. And they're angry, so you have race riots that break out all across the country. So you have 1919, you have the Harlem Renaissance going on at this time as well. The 1910s going into the mid-1930s. You have people like Zora Neale Hurston, people like Langston Hughes. You have this whole arts movement with the Harlem Renaissance. You have the Marcus Garvey movement, Universal Negro Improvement Association, UNIA, started in 1914 in Jamaica. Because Garvey was an immigrant, right? Okay, people attacking immigrants. Garvey was an immigrant. Okay? And then he comes to the U.S. in 1916. He wants to hook up with Booker T. Washington. But Booker T. Washington dies the year before, 1915. He's inspired by Booker T. Washington. He read Booker T. Washington's book, Up From Slavery. But he sets up chapters of the Universal Negro Improvement Association here. How many people are familiar with the UNIA? The red, black, and green flag. Nobody's familiar with the Universal Negro Improvement Association? Okay. So the UNIA, so how many people know about the red, black, and green flag?
Red, black, and green.
The red, black, and green flag. That's created by the Universal Negro Improvement Association, August 13, 1920. Okay? So with Dr. Carter G. Woodson, because he realizes that our people don't understand their history, he and some co-founders create the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History to preserve, document, and research the history of our people and the accomplishments and achievements of African Americans in this country, but also on the continent of Africa, because he felt that if we did not preserve and document this history, it would be lost forever. All right? Now, when he creates Negro History Week in 1926, this was never designed to be the only time in the year we study our history. See, a lot of us have this backwards. Because he was an educator, he said that it did not make sense to teach our children their history 1 month out of the year, or 1 week out of the year. He said that 1 week, that second week of February, that should be the period of time that they use to show what they have been studying year-round. Okay? He also felt that the history of African Americans and our accomplishments and achievements needed to be taught in every school across the country. Not just the schools that we were in, but every school across the country, because he said that the bigotry and prejudice that we face largely comes from stereotypes and lies being told about us. And because people don't have the truth, they believe the lies. Right? So yesterday, you had the interview, and people saw the full interview, Governor Ralph Northam out of Virginia, right? And he talked about, he was being interviewed by Gayle King for CBS News. And he's in Virginia, and we know that August 20th, 1619 is this year they're going to commemorate the 400-year anniversary of those Africans coming into Jamestown, Virginia. They come to Fort Compton, right? Well, one, if you study our history, how many people are familiar with Dr. David Imhotep, who wrote the book, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence? Nobody? Oh, you got to research Dr. David Imhotep. Because this brother's book deals with the African presence in this country going back at least 51,700 years ago, based upon archaeological evidence. Okay? How many people are familiar with the Folsom people? You familiar with Dr. Claude Anderson? Yeah. So Dr. Claude Anderson talks about the Folsom people. He's one of my teachers. I just interviewed him January 13th this year. And the Folsom people are another early group of Africans that come here about 13,000, 14,000 years ago. F-O-L-S-O-M. Google the Folsom people. Folsom, Arizona is named after them. Folsom Prison is named after them. So when we understand our history, even though slavery did take place and the transatlantic slave trade did happen, we were here for tens of thousands of years before that. And one of the things that happens is that when European settlers come here, a lot of the African groups get relabeled as Native Americans. So if you don't understand the names that your people have had throughout history, you won't know how to find yourself in history. When we look at the Louisiana Purchase of 1803, there was a commercial for one of the banks, and they were reenacting the Louisiana Purchase, right? And they showed Thomas Jefferson, and they got 828,000 square miles of land for less than 3 cents an acre. They got it for $15 million. They got it from the French, okay? What they didn't tell you is most of the land that the French sold to the U.S., the French didn't even own that land. It belonged to Native Americans and some African people, okay? So Governor Northam, yesterday, he talked about those, he referred to the Africans as indentured servants. He's talking about the early ones coming into Jamestown, Virginia. How many people study the history of slavery early in Jamestown, Virginia in 1619? How many people study that history? Who's read Before the Mayflower by Lerone Bennett Jr.? Anybody read that book? Because if you read this book, you find out that the slave statutes didn't exist in Virginia till 1661. It didn't exist in Massachusetts until 1641. Massachusetts was the first colony to have slave statutes. Okay? Prior to that, what we call enslaved Africans were not enslaved for perpetuity. They were indentured for 5 to 7 years. That's not me. He talks about this in this book. So this is a crucial book. The reason why is in the back of the book, he deals with a chronology of history from 1619 up until about 1980, something like that. And if you go and look at, this is the 6th edition, if you look at page 443, August 1619, he says, history of Black America began with landing of 20 blacks at Jamestown, Virginia. John Rolfe, R-O-L-F-E, said the ship arrived, quote, about the latter end of August, end quote, and that it brought not anything but 20 and odd Negroes. Surviving evidence suggests that the 20 blacks were accorded the status of indentured servants. So when you study this history, see the way that we think slavery evolved in the colonies is not necessarily the way it evolved. So we really have to study this history. Now, USA Today had a really good article dealing with this. You should check out that article. I'll give you the name of it. And it deals with what Governor Northam said was that he went to Fort Comfort recently, and this is where those Africans first came in Jamestown, Virginia, and he referred to them as slaves. And he said a historian corrected him and said they were indentured servants. So when he was doing the interview with Gayle King, he's going based upon what the historian said. Okay? People jumped on him, but they haven't studied the history. Okay? So this is why this month is so important, and we have to continue this year round. But not only don't white people understand most of this history, most African Americans don't understand this history also. Last night on my show, I dealt with the history of blackface. How did blackface start? When did blackface start? Who can tell me? Anybody? Who's T.D. Rice? Thomas Dartmouth Rice. Huh? Thomas Dartmouth Rice is known as the father of minstrelsy. He's known as the father of the minstrel shows. 1828, 1829, he puts on tattered torn clothing, puts on blackface, adopts a southern slave dialect, and creates this Jim Crow character. The story goes that he sees an enslaved African male tending to animals, and he's singing a song, turn around, jump around, I jump just so. Every time I turn around, I jump Jim Crow. This is where the Jim Crow character comes from, that the Jim Crow laws, segregation laws in the South were named after. Okay? So we have to understand this history. All right, so it's important to take this beyond 28 days. And also it's important not just to study history from 1619 up until now, but to study our history going back tens of thousands of years, because it's a continuum. Our history in this country did not start in slavery. And the reason why a lot of our children don't want to understand their history is because we keep telling them that our history started in slavery. Okay, I got news for you. Christopher Columbus never came to this land we call the United States of America. If you study where he went, you go to history.com. I use white sources and our sources. History.com is the official website of the History Channel. He set sail August 3rd, 1492 on the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. He goes on 4 voyages. He goes into Cuba, Puerto Rico, Honduras, Panama. He goes into Central America. He goes into South America. The closest he comes to this land is Cuba, which is 90 miles away. So why is there a bust of Christopher Columbus in downtown Detroit? He never even came to this land. What he did bring to the people who he came across was genocide. Okay? And Columbus helps to spread and expand the transatlantic slave trade. All right? But see, so this is important information that we have to understand. So not only were African people in this land tens of thousands of years before slavery started, but Columbus, who some people keep saying discovered America, didn't even come to this land we call the United States of America. So as we dig into this history, we'll see the lies that have been taught to us. All right? So people's history and culture teaches them how to deal with the problems of the past in the present and the future to meet the needs of the community. This is why this is so important. Let me give you the name of this quick article, and then I'll sit down. I have my DVD lectures over here dealing with our history, all different topics. This Saturday in Andy's Knowledge Cafe, 2 p.m. to 6 p.m., I'm doing a lecture dealing with a double lecture dealing with the history of the Rosewood Massacre of 1923. You all saw the movie Rosewood? Yeah. Came out in 1997. So I deal with a comparison between the movie and the real history, what was correct and what was wrong. All right. And then also I'm doing a presentation dealing with the history of black jockeys because we used to dominate horse racing. The early winners of the Kentucky Derby were black. 1875, the first Kentucky Derby is ran. Oliver Lewis wins the first Kentucky Derby. He was 19 years old. But we were pushed out of horse racing. We were sabotaged. We were systematically pushed out of horse racing. Okay? All right, so with that, I'm going to sit down and middle pack. Oh yeah, on the 16th, they have the at the 2025 Middle Belt, the Booker Dozier Center in Inkster. They have the Middle Passage ceremony taking place. That starts at 4 p.m. It starts at 6. Okay, so I'm the keynote speaker over there also. On the 16th, I'm speaking in 3 locations. On the 16th, all right? But that's the last one, so be sure to come there also. I got to leave my lecture early and head over there. But that's out in Inkster, Michigan. Who knows what the Middle Passage is? Who knows what the Middle, yes, sister, what's the Middle Passage? Yeah, you raised your hand, right? Okay, go ahead. Right, so the Middle Passage is that part of what some people call the triangle of trade, coming from Africa to the New World, to the Americas. And we know when you study the history that oftentimes they did not come directly here. They stopped in the Caribbean. Some get dropped off the Caribbean, but they have the breaking ground where they're enslaved there first and they're trained to be slaves before they come here. Okay? So when we talk about Jamaicans and we talk about, wait a second, you know, Jamaicans weren't slaves, I'm like, well, what are you talking about? You ever studied the history of Jamaica? Jamaica, they were conquered by the British. Just like you had the British colonies here. We had the same slave masters. So a lot of times we have more in common just by the colonizers that we dealt with. Okay, USA Today has an article from today. Virginia Governor Ralph Northam slammed for referring to first indentured servants from Africa instead of slaves. Okay, USA Today. But if you read this article, they deal with historians who say it's a nuanced history, right? It's not just black and white. You have to understand that history. Okay, and a lot of the early, even the ones coming August 2016-19, most of them are going to be released after 5 to 7 years. They're given land. You're going to have that happen. So the way we think slavery started, at least, in the 13 colonies is not necessarily the way it happened. That's why we have to study the history, do the research. So A people's history and culture teaches them how to deal with the problems of the past, in the present, and the future to meet the needs of the community. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. All right? And when we talk about Black Panther, I'll leave you with this. I just did an extensive presentation dealing with the film Black Panther. What's today? Monday? Saturday. All my days are running together, okay? And I've been speaking all over the place. The film Black Panther directly relates to African history and culture, okay? We talk about Wakanda. Even though Wakanda is a fictitious place, Wakanda is a real word. Wakanda is in the Sioux Indian language, it's in the Omaha Panther language. It means possesses secret powers, but it's also a Bantu word as well, just like Kiswahili. Kwanzaa is a Kiswahili word. Kwanzaa is also a Bantu word. It's a group of 500 languages. We see them spoken in Southern Africa. We see them spoken in Cameroon. We see them spoken in East Africa. Okay? So the film Black Panther is deep on multiple levels. When we deal with something like the Dora Milaje, okay? Mama, you talked about the Dora Milaje. That comes from the Amazons of Dahomey, was modern-day Benin. They were called the Mino or the Ahosi. This was a regiment of African women who were female warriors, okay, who fought against the French in the Franco-Dahomey Wars, okay. So when you study this movie directly reconnects African Americans to African history, culture, language, etc. All right. So with that, I want to say Imhotep, and be sure to come see me over my table also.